Hello, everybody. I am getting like tons of people watching these lives later. And so I just want to say for those of you who are watching this live later on rewatch, I'm just going to introduce myself really quick because it has come to my attention that not everybody knows who I am. Imagine that. That was a joke. So my name is Alex Gilbert, and I am a watercolor artist. I draw and I paint botanical things, so loose florals like this one behind me, and also super detailed realistic florals. I always have my little visual aids here so people know what I'm talking about, but this hydrangea, for example, is a super highly realistic botanical watercolor. And I actually have a background in law, in human rights law and refugee law. And when I was almost done with my master's in law, I actually switched to being an artist. So, I don't know, does that resonate with anybody, switching a career from one thing to the other? So, totally pivoted, and I started painting, and I loved it, and I'm completely self-taught. So I stand by that anybody can learn anything. You don't have to go to art school. You don't have to have a fancy degree. If you want to create and you're willing to put in the time and the energy and the practice, then you are going to be able to create. So I am a much more relaxed and a much more content person now that I'm not in the legal field anymore. Props to you if you are, but I prefer to paint flowers and teach other people how to paint flowers. Before COVID, I did tons of in-person classes, and I know some of you who are watching this actually came to those in-person classes, so hello. And I love teaching people, and I really love teaching beginners. It's my favorite thing to take somebody who has no confidence in their creative ability or who says, I can't even draw a stick figure, and then within just a couple hours to watch as they can create, to show them the tips and the tricks and the techniques that they need to be able to create. So that's my story in a nutshell. I live in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm originally from upstate New York, and I lived in Europe for about 15 years, so I've been all over the place. I live in Fort Worth, Texas now, where I have family, and I paint for a living, and I teach classes, and sell paintings, and have a good time doing that, let me tell you. So, hopefully that story kind of resonates with some of you. Okay, let's see. Oh, Carrie Ann says she was a lawyer too. Welcome to the Was a Lawyer Club. And Barbara says that she's a beginner. That's great because beginners are the best. They have no bad habits to unlearn. You can just learn everything right from the beginning. So there's that website for you if you want to click on it or bookmark it to go to later. And then I'm just going to show you the materials that we're going to be using today, the supplies and materials. I know everybody has different supplies. One of my goals in teaching you the drawing aspects of these wildflowers is that you can do it with anything that you have at home. So I've been using a Sharpie and just a giant piece of paper. And that's with the watercolor, it's a little bit trickier. You do need some watercolor supplies. But with the drawing, it's hopefully quite simple and you can do it with anything that you have on hand. So what I'm going to use today is just printer paper and a Sharpie to do the beginning drawings, to show you that. And then I'm going to do a little bit of that loose watercolor, kind of what I did with the goldenrod. If you've been watching the Facebook Lives, you'll have seen the goldenrod tutorial where it's very loose and you're just adding a lot of water and then dropping the paint in. So we're going to do that kind of Bluebonnet today. I got to put my glasses on because it's amazing. I draw so much better when I can see things. Imagine. Okay. I'm going to switch the camera. Okay, so bluebonnets are weird flowers, and their petals are shaped, they have like a 3D kind of shape. And so what I want to talk about is the guidelines that I'm always going on about, because it's easier to draw something when you have guidelines to do it. So the guidelines that we're going to include for a bluebonnet is, and I'm going to do this in Sharpie. I would encourage you, if you're drawing, to do this in pencil so that you can erase those lines. But we're going to start by making, it's kind of a long egg shape is how I would call it. And that is where we're going to find all the blooms. Okay. And then in the background, we're going to have a line that kind of goes right through there. So it sort of looks like a big lollipop or a popsicle or something, a fudgesicle. And that's going to be our rough outline for where our flowers are going to go. Then we're going to have a bunch of stems coming out of here where our petals will be, and they mostly slant upward, but sometimes they kind of come out straight. And you can just do this any which way. If a bloom is coming out of the front, right, because not all blooms are going to come straight out of the side. If it's going to come out of the front, it's going to be more like that. Okay, you're not going to see the whole stem. It's just pointing right at you. Like, here's my finger, but if I go like this, right, you just see the tip of my finger, even though it's actually this long. Okay, so we're just going to put like a little stem there to show the ones that are in front and behind, and a few more. And when we draw the flowers, they're going to be roughly following this lollipop shape. When we do the leaves are almost star-like. Okay, so when we do the leaves, we're going to draw that center line just like I showed you, and then we're going to have these veins coming out of it. Okay, and you're going to have 5 or 6 things coming out of there. And again, if you're doing this in pencil, it's going to look a bit better when you erase it, but I'm just showing you in Sharpie how it's going to look. Okay, so these are our guidelines, and you want the guidelines so you know what you're drawing. So I always like when I'm doing a botanical drawing or a flower drawing for the first time to break up the different components into different parts and practice those different parts before we combine them all together. Okay, so first of all, let me know in the comments, is everybody following along with these guidelines so far? Was that pretty simple to follow along? So we're going to start with that egg shape, draw a center line through there. That's going to be the main stem. We have the little branches, the little stems coming off, and we're going to draw the flowers at the end of those. And then down on this bottom third, we have our leaf guideline, our little leaf outline. Okay, good. Sandy says she got it. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice our flower petals. So looking straight on into a bluebonnet flower, we are going to start with a little C shape like this, and then copy that on the other side like that. Okay, so it's almost a miniature little egg. Sandy's got it, Barbara's got it, Beth has got it, Shanalyn has got it. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to start like that. And then right here, we're going to draw, I think it looks like an elephant ear. That's the closest thing I can compare it to. But we're going to come out and around and then meet that right at the bottom. Okay, so again, we're going to come up and out like an elephant ear, down and in right here at the bottom. Okay, and then we're going to do that exact same thing on the other side. Try and make it pretty even, but it doesn't have to be exactly even because it's a flower, you know? It doesn't have to be exactly right. And that is the easiest way to start drawing a front-facing bluebonnet blossom. From the side, we're still going to draw these different parts, but it's going to look a little bit different. So from the side, we're going to go like that. Okay, so we're still doing that C shape, but this one is kind of at an angle a little bit. And then out, there's that C shape. Anita says she's following. Cass says she's got it. Excellent. Okay, so we have this little, it's almost like a pumpkin seed, right? And then right about 1/3 of the way, okay, up that little shape, we're going to come up and around and draw that elephant ear like this. Okay, so that's from the side. And we can do the same thing on the other side where we draw that part that kind of juts out of the flower and then go up and around there, and then we have that from the side. So it's pretty easy once you break it down into these little parts, right? If I say to you, just draw a bluebonnet, it can be a lot harder, you know, especially if you're a beginner, you're just learning how to draw or just learning how to paint, it can be challenging. But if you break it down into these little parts, it becomes much simpler. Okay, now if you want to add a little bit more perspective to these blooms that are on the side, you're going to draw the back one as well. So that other elephant ear that's coming out. And it's just going to come out of there, and you're just going to draw a little one. Okay? So you can see how that makes it even more, it makes it have even more depth. Now from behind, if you can imagine you're seeing behind this bloom, all you're going to see is that little guy. And he can just kind of be a blob in the back because the eye is going to be more focused on things in the front. Now, when we go to add these in, okay, you can look at a reference picture if you want to get a really good idea, but really you're just going to kind of randomly scatter them around. So you can put a couple front-facing ones here, and that's what these little stems are for, right? That's going to remind us of where to put them. We could put our side-facing ones off on these stems here, and we might have a couple in the back as well. Okay, so we have our guideline, we have our main petal shapes that we're going to use, and let's just do the leaf really quick. So say we have our leaf coming out of here and we have our guidelines. So let's say we have five or six little spokes coming out. Now those are going to be the center of your leaves. So around that, you're just going to draw your leaf shapes. Okay. And again, if you do your guidelines in pencil, you can erase them and then you'll just be left with your leaf shape. So over here, if I did that on this guideline, I'm just drawing that. I'm coming down about halfway with each petal, with each leaf, and then going back up, so about halfway. And if you want to, if it makes it even easier for you, you can draw a little X about halfway between them in pencil so that you know where you're going. And then you just bring your pen right there, back up, okay? And so the more guidelines, the better at the beginning, and then eventually you'll be able to do it without the guidelines. All right, let's get some feedback. So was that pretty simple? Did you follow along with drawing the petals from front facing, from the side, from the left side, and behind? And also how to do the leaf shape. Okay, so we have some pretty simple guidelines for how to do that. And I think what I'll do next is actually draw that. I'll leave this off to the side so you can keep seeing it. Okay, good. Shannon says great. Barbara says cool. I think it's cool too, just to break things down into their basic parts. Now, you know, if you do this, not every bluebonnet you draw is going to look the same. And as you do it, you'll get more confident with those shapes. You'll be able to twist them and turn them a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to do this just the way I would tell you to do it, which is with pencil. Okay, so we're going to draw that lollipop shape. Okay, and then I'm going to have my stem coming through here. And I'm going to have a leaf coming out of the side, and I'll draw those spokes. And I'll do another one over here. Okay. And then I'm going to draw my little stem markers. So at the top of a bluebonnet, okay, so at the top of the bluebonnet, I didn't show you this, but there's often little buds. So all that is these little seed shapes, a bunch of them over and over again. And you just kind of build them up on each other. It's pretty simple. Okay, and that's going to be what's at the top. Barbara says, I love your guidelines. Thank you, Barbara. I also love my guidelines, and I have to tell you that it was really hard to find any examples of how to draw like this at the beginning. And I like doing this for people because it makes drawing so much more approachable. And honestly, painting, because once you know the guideline, you know the shape you're going for in your head. Now, Cass has a question. Let's see what she says. Wouldn't leaving the pencil mark on the leaf let you have a guide for veins? Yes, you absolutely could. You could use that as a guide for veins. You might want to erase it a little bit just so it's a little bit softer looking, but you can draw with pen over it and then erase it also. Okay, so I'm just going to have some marks here for, at the top, I'm going to be doing those little buds. So I'm going to start putting these marks for the blooms just right along here. And some of them, if you look at a picture, they're pretty rigid looking. They kind of slant up just a little bit, but they're almost horizontal. And I'll just put a couple marks, just small marks to show where the front and the back ones are. And that's good. I like that. Now, if you want to do this in pencil first, you absolutely can. And remember, we're going to start with this this oval shape on the ones that face the side. Okay, and then on the front ones, and I think actually if you do the front ones first, it's a little bit better because then you can draw the other ones behind them. So we're going to have those elephant ears come out like that, and like that. And it's a good idea to do it in pencil first, especially when you're just getting started, because you'll probably make a few mistakes and you'll want to fix your lines. Okay, so I'm going to put this one a little bit off center just to make it look a little more interesting. And I'm just going through here and filling in with the pencil. Adding that little line behind it to make it have a bit more depth. At the top, I'll have these these bud kind of shapes, I guess we would call them. Okay. And then if it's a little bit too sparse, if you want to add a few other things in there, you absolutely can say maybe this one is behind it, right? So you're just going to ghost those lines in. I'm finding this very relaxing. I forget to talk sometimes when I'm drawing because I do find it relaxing. I'm going to a baseball game tonight, which I'm pretty excited about. I haven't been to a baseball game in like 10 years, and I hope it's going to be fun. Probably it will be fun. I'm going with my boyfriend, and we have fun together. Although I've been trying to eat healthier, and going to a baseball game isn't really the place to do that. Okay, so there's a little hole here, so I want to fill that in. And so I'm just going to add another one from the side. Okay. And then down here I can kind of sketch in how I want my leaves to look. There we go. Okay, I don't love the way that middle leaf is looking, so I'm going to erase that, which is why you should do things in pencil. And I'm going to draw it a little bit bigger. Okay, so now I have everything done in pencil. Cass asks if the flowers should fill in the entire oval. So it will look just like this, honestly. The oval is giving you a rough idea of where to put those blooms. And if you look up pictures of bluebonnets, you'll see some are a little bit shorter and squatter, and some are a lot longer. So it kind of depends on the species you're drawing. But yeah, so basically you're just using this as a rough guideline to fill it in. It doesn't have to go exactly to the edges, though. Okay, so then from that part, I would take a drawing pen, and I have my Unipin number 3 here, and that's part of the giveaway this week. All of these drawing tools I'm using are part of the giveaway this week, so except you get better paper than printer paper. So then I would start going over the lines that I like. Okay, so I'm still going to want the stems, but for example, this stem is going to come behind this petal, so I'm not going to draw right over that. All right. Sometimes the stems are just there as a guideline also, and you won't even be able to see them because they're behind the flower. In between the flowers, you can definitely fill in that part of the stem. Okay. A little stem there. Now let me know, would you like me to demonstrate watercolor today as well, or is this enough? Do you feel like if I did the watercolor it would be a little bit overwhelming to learn that as well, or would you like the watercolor tips? Okay, so I'm just tracing over the pencil lines here, and one of my favorite parts about this is when I get to erase the pencil lines, because then everything looks so neat and tidy. I love that part. Okay, and I have my stem coming right here. Drawing these little guys. Like that. Okay, you know what I'm going to talk about while I finish outlining this is, I don't know how many of you saw it, but I posted an idea yesterday on the Facebook group and in the email. And I'm nervous and I'm really excited about this idea. So if you didn't hear it, I'm going to tell you right now, and it's an idea to have a monthly membership for drawing and watercoloring flowers. And I think that it would be amazing because just in this wildflower challenge, I love teaching, and I've already met like so many of you, and even if we've just been talking on Instagram or something for like a week, I'm like, oh, I wonder how they're doing, or if one of you misses live, I'm like, I wonder where you are. And I just love that creative community all over the world. and how much we've all been creating, and it's been really fun, and I've been enjoying it. So I thought it would be really fun to have a creative community, and it would be a monthly paid membership, and it would be a private course on a separate website that's just for courses. And I have so many ideas for it. So, I mean, we could have, the course would go from just beginners and learning the fundamentals of drawing and the fundamentals of watercolor all the way through. If I put a bouquet in front of you, you would be confident drawing and painting that. You'd be a confident botanical artist. And so that would take us through things like watercolor, wet into wet technique, and glazing, and testing different color palettes out, how to mix your colors. We could do paintings together, have certain paintings every month. We could focus each month on a different flower. We could do hydrangeas for a month and learn how to paint them loosely and how to paint them realistically. We could do bouquets, how do you do a wedding bouquet or a loose bouquet? How do you, how do you get reference photos, right? Because there's a lot of copyright issues when it comes to reference photos. You can't really just paint from other people's photos. We could have a whole library of reference photos. We would have live Q&As. I could do coaching calls with people and kind of guide you through your painting or your drawing questions right there live. We'd have a private Facebook group. So I don't know. I just the more I think about it, the more, look, I just wrinkled the paper because I'm too excited. The more I think about it, the more excited I am about it. And I would love your input. If that's something that you'd be interested in, if that's something that you would love, or what would you like to see in that, you can send me an email. You can leave a comment here. Okay, so I would love to know what you think about that idea. Ever since it hit me, I've been lying awake in bed at night, thinking of all the things I could add to that group. The giveaways we could do, or sending out watercolor supplies that we could all try at the same time. I don't know. I have a ton of different ideas about it. So I'm excited. I think that's coming across. Okay, so here we have a basic Bluebonnet drawing. We could make that more interesting with adding contour lines and things. And I would love to see what you guys do with that. For right now, I'm going to move on to the watercolor section of this because I can see in the comments that you all want watercolor, which is my favorite thing to do. So that's good. So, hello. Before we switch to watercolor, I'm going to read through your comments here. So I asked if you guys wanted me to watercolor, and then Sandy and Renee and Alicia and Shannon and Jane all say, please do watercolor, and I am here to serve you. So it is my pleasure to do watercolor. You are going to need, if you are going to do the watercolor paints. So I have my trusty palette, and so you're going to need blue paint. I have a little pipette. Okay, you don't need a pipette. You can just use a paintbrush, but I like pipettes. I have a trusty, I forgot which camera I was looking at. A trusty number 5 spotter brush. I love that spotter. I am just going to use that, okay? In the back of my head, I have the outline, just like we were drawing, those guidelines, and we're going to be doing a lot of wet painting here, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So we already have the petal shapes, right? We already have an idea of what those petals look like, what the flower looks like. I have my water here. I get a hard time from my family and my boyfriend and my friends for always having water near my computer and electronics because I am a little bit clumsy. But, so far so good, right? So with my pipette, I'm going to add a little bit of over here. I'm going to add a little bit of water into this paint. All right, so Cass says, tell us why you like this paint over other types. So I've used a bunch of different watercolor paints from student to professional, and I have recommendations for student paint too. I recommend Winsor & Newton Cotman because it's a more affordable paint when you're just starting out. I like Core because it spreads so beautifully. They have a very vibrant color, and they have a unique milling process and a unique binder, which means that it is very finely ground. So when you put it in water, it blooms really beautifully. Daniel Smith is another one that you'll hear about from watercolor artists. Daniel Smith. and Winsor & Newton. There's a lot of different kinds. So what I'm going to do is start out with just painting with water, and I have that shape in my head. In fact, I will do this outline just so that you guys can see roughly what I'm doing. So that's not going to be very visible, but hopefully you can see just the outline. I don't want it to be too dark. Okay. Shannon Lynn says, what do you think of Daniel Smith? They're beautiful. I love Daniel Smith paints too. I like Core a little bit better, but I use Daniel Smith's quinacridone colors. So they have a really beautiful quinacridone rose, and that is my favorite pink. Joanne says, which blue is that? Honestly, Joanne, that is a whole bunch of different blues mixed together. It's mostly ultramarine blue, but there's purple in here and phthalo blue. I don't like using the colors straight out of the tubes anymore. I like mixing my own things. So it's all mixed together. Okay, so to start with, I'm just going to be drawing the petal shapes in water. And just a few of those off to the side, and because of the reflection, hopefully you'll be able to see that. So I'm just following that outline that I did with the pen in the same way, and then I'm just going to put a little bit of watercolor in there. And I have a paper towel somewhere around here. The spelling is Q-O-R. Here you go. Looks like this. This is their little travel palette, and I highly recommend their travel palette as well. I'm going to give away another set of their paints next week in the watercolor giveaway. So, just something to keep in mind. Let me see if this is bright enough. It's so gray here. I'm not sure it'll be bright enough without the light, but it is easier to see this without the reflection. Can you guys still see that okay? So what I'm doing is I'm just putting those same shapes. Okay, and I can add a little bit of darker paint if I want. But those same shapes here, have something come out. And of course, when I go in after it's dry and add the other layers of color, it'll be even clearer what I'm doing. Okay, so if you guys were part of a watercolor and drawing flowers membership, what are the things you would like to see in it? I think interviews with experts. We could learn about flowers too, you know. We could have botany lessons as well, how to grow these flowers, how to paint from real life flowers. So many things that we could do in it. And I'm excited about it. Because, you know, these live lessons are great, but I do not have time to get into the in-depth things of it, you know? I do not have all the time I'd like to talk about technique, to go into glazing, into the layering process. Sometimes I want to assign homework, I'll be honest. The teacher in me wants to assign homework. Okay, so we have all these blooms, and I'm going to just grab a little green paint from over here, from in this palette. Okay, I'm going to twirl my brush so it gets to a nice little point. And I am going to just draw a little stem through here. And the kind of painting I'm doing is loose painting, and so I kind of like how that bleeds together. Okay, so I'm okay with that bleeding into the blue a little bit. I'm going to have this come to a sharp point again and bring the stems out from the flowers, just like we talked about. Okay, and up here, I'm just going to use my brush to do a little bit of like stamping, just like we talked about at the last class, which is just really just putting your brush down and not really doing too much brush strokes, you know? Now, when it comes to the leaves, watercolor leaves are fun to do. You can still draw a little guideline if you want in the watercolor paint, or you can just kind of go to town making those shapes, and I'm pushing down and coming up to a tip with that. And I have lots of live lessons in the Facebook group about how to make leaves where you're pushing down and pulling up like this. So I would definitely recommend checking those out if you want help with your leaves a little bit. Okay, if you want, you could try and do a leaf behind the flowers too, because that's just going to add some depth. And we are all about contrast and depth. Okay. And the name of the game with this one is just keeping it loose. So I'm not going in with too much detail. I just want to keep it nice and loose. I'm going to add a few more flowers in down here at the bottom. Okay, and then these are mostly dry, so I can go back and I can add just a bit more detail into them now, because remember, you want contrast. Contrast is what makes paintings pop. So these ones in the back, I'm going to have them be just a little bit darker. Okay, you can draw those shapes out a little bit more with your brush. It's just nice and loose. If you feel like it's getting away from you, if it's getting too muddy or too wet, you just take a step back and let it dry for a few minutes. That's one of the nice things about watercolor, is that it dries pretty quickly. Okay, so you can just take a step back and let it dry and then go back to it. And you always want to remember with watercolor that you're going from light to dark. You can always get darker and you can never get lighter. So just remember that. Okay, and you know, with these down here, they're not even really very detailed. I'm just giving the illusion of the flower down there, and the eye is going to fill in what the eye wants to fill in, as long as you have enough little details to show it what they are. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks pretty cool. Let me zoom in on it a little bit for you so you can see how the water is doing things. Okay, so it's all just mixing. When you get up real close, you can see it's quite blobby, but just because of where we're putting the stems and the white space, it just tricks the eye into seeing a bluebonnet, which is pretty cool. Now I will lift this all the way up and you can see the messy desk that I'm working with, and I will switch it back to my face. Hello. Okay, so this live has been 40 minutes. I feel like I'm right in that sweet spot with the 40 minutes. Did you like that? What did you learn? Are you going to do that? Barbara said, I moved my iPad. If I hit the angry face, I'm sorry. I didn't see an angry face pop up, and I hope that you didn't, but thanks for telling me. I would have been like, what did I do, Barbara? Anita says, looks good. Shannon says, beautiful. Okay, so I want to see what you guys create. Here is the link for the private Facebook group, and it is free and easy to enter. So there's the link for that. All right, thank you, everybody. I can't wait to see what you paint. See you then. Bye.